It was supposed to be a weekend of family bonding. That's what they called it. A little getaway at my cousin Ben's lake house. Just us kids, no parents. Except I wasn't really one of the kids anymore. I was 23, just graduated, trying to figure out my next move. And when my older cousins invited me to tag along, I thought maybe, finally, I was being seen as part of the group. I was wrong. The first night started off fine. We grilled burgers, played cards, talked about old memories and new jobs and whose life looked best on Instagram. But when it came time to call it a night, things shifted. I followed everyone back inside, expecting to crash on the big sectional in the living room, like we'd done at Grandma's growing up. Except the couch was already taken. And the spare rooms? All claimed. Ben looked at me, half laughing. Hey, sorry man, didn't realize you'd still be here this late. Still be here? I was invited. I blinked. Yeah, I figured I'd crash with you guys. His girlfriend, a girl named Mallory with the world's sharpest voice, chimed in. There's always the porch. It's screened in. You can take one of the blankets. Like that was a perfectly normal thing to offer someone. Sleep. Outside. On a porch. No bed, no pillow, no apology. I looked around. No one objected. They were all too busy pairing off, laughing, closing doors behind them. So I took the blanket, opened the porch door, and laid down on the wooden floor like I was some kind of afterthought. And you know what the worst part was? I didn't argue. I didn't demand better. I just accepted it. Because part of me had gotten used to being the extra, the one who could be left out without anyone blinking. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my dad, he owned this house, and they had just told the owner's kid to sleep outside like a stray dog. I stared up at the ceiling fan spinning above me and started making a plan. I woke up to the sound of laughter and the smell of bacon, the kind of smell that seeps through window screens and reminds you you're not really invited, just tolerated. My back ached from the hard porch floor. I had one of those thin fleece throws wrapped around me like it could actually block the morning chill. Spoiler, it couldn't. I got up slowly, brushing off the dirt from the blanket, and slid open the screen door to go inside. They were all at the kitchen table. Ben, Mallory, my cousin Tracy, some guy named Caleb who I swear had only been dating Tracy for like a week, but still got a better sleeping arrangement than I did. They looked up for half a second, then went right back to their pancakes. No one asked how I slept. No one offered me a plate. Not even a damn cup of coffee. Ben gave me a half smile. You can grab something if there's any left. There wasn't. Mallory had the last pancake on her plate, practically licking the syrup off her fork like she was daring me to say something. So I poured myself a glass of tap water, leaned against the counter, and tried not to feel humiliated. That's when Mallory said it. You're not gonna, get weird about last night, right? It's just, there's only so much room, and you kinda came last minute. Last minute? I had been invited 2 weeks ago. I brought snacks. I chipped in for gas. I even helped carry the firewood in. I looked at Ben, waiting for him to back me up. He didn't. Just shrugged and said, It's chill. It's not a big deal, right? Not a big deal. Just slept outside like an animal. No food, no bed, no acknowledgement. And something inside me clicked. They didn't know. They had no idea my dad was the one who bought this house 2 years ago as an investment property. He'd let Ben use it because he wanted the kids to have good memories. He just hadn't told them who owned it, said he didn't want to make it weird. I had kept that secret, out of politeness, out of the same desperate to fit in instinct that made me sleep on a porch and pretend I was fine. But as I stood there, stomach growling, back sore, pride shattered, I realized I didn't owe them that silence anymore. After breakfast, or whatever that mess was, everyone drifted off. Some went down to the dock. Mallory and Tracy started staging photos for Instagram, holding coffee mugs like it was some perfect family weekend. Ben grabbed a beer and wandered off without a word. I sat on the porch again, not because I wanted to, but because that was my place now, apparently. And as I sat there, still cold, still hungry, still trying to figure out why I let this happen, I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, scrolled back. 2 weeks ago, Ben, hey, we're heading to the lake house for Memorial Weekend. You should come. Me, I'd love to. Let me know what to bring. Ben, Just yourself? It's gonna be chill. Just myself. I had the receipts. Literal proof that I was invited, that I wasn't just some tag-along who overstayed their welcome. I stared at those messages, reread them over and over, and I thought, what if I sent them back? What if I screenshotted the messages and dropped them in the group chat right now? Let them see how fake their "you kind of came last minute" excuse really was. But I didn't, because suddenly I realized something bigger. It wasn't about the invitation. It was about how they treated me once I got here. They had a choice, every single one of them, to include me, to ask how I was doing, to make space, both literally and emotionally. They didn't. They saw me as the easy one to shove aside, the one who wouldn't make a fuss, the background character in their carefully curated weekend. That was the moment I stopped wanting to be included. I didn't want their attention. I wanted my dignity, and I was about to take it back, because they might have controlled the vibe for now, but they didn't know who had the final say about this house. I did. Later that afternoon, Ben asked if I could move my stuff. Mallory wants to set up a hammock on the porch, he said. It's like her thing. Her thing. Apparently, her thing now required me to make myself even more invisible. I didn't argue. I just nodded, grabbed my bag, and walked out the front door. But instead of tossing my stuff in the car and sulking, I did something different. I called my dad. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, kiddo, how's the trip? I paused, then said very calmly, Do they know? He was quiet for a beat. Know what? That you own the house. Another pause. Longer this time. I assumed Ben told them. I didn't make a big deal about it because I didn't want them treating you weird. You know how family can get. Oh, I knew. I knew exactly how they could get. I told him what had happened, how I slept outside, how they forgot to save me a spot, forgot to feed me, forgot basic decency. He didn't sound surprised. That's disappointing, he said. I hoped they'd grown up. I laughed dryly. Well, they haven't, and I'm not sleeping on a porch for one more night. There was a pause again, then a different tone in his voice, calm, sharp. Then don't. I'll send you the copy of the deed. It's in my name and yours. We put your name on it last year. Figured it might come in handy one day. I blinked. Wait, what? Yeah, you're co-owner. Legally, you have every right to be there. And just like that, everything shifted. All that quiet humiliation from the night before, that gnawing feeling in my chest, it was gone, replaced by something solid. Ownership. They thought they were doing me a favor by letting me crash. But the truth, they were guests in my house. I walked back up the porch steps with a calmness I hadn't felt in days. The kind that comes from knowing a secret no one else in the room does, and realizing it gives you power they never imagined you had. Inside, they were all lounging around the living room. Mallory was scrolling through her phone. Ben was half asleep on the recliner. Tracy and Caleb were playing some card game, giggling like they'd just discovered humor. I cleared my throat. They all looked up. Hey, I said, steady as stone. I need everyone in the living room for a quick house talk. Ben blinked. Mallory looked annoyed. Caleb and Tracy exchanged a look. Like, what is this? Are we in trouble? Ben smirked. Is this like a house meeting? Yep, I said. And I'm running it. That got their attention. They gathered, slowly, half interested. I stood in front of the fireplace, the same one I helped my dad fix up last summer, back when I thought this place might be where good memories were made. So, I started. I wanted to clear something up. I pulled up the email from my dad, opened the PDF, held up my phone so they could see the deed, clearly labeled with his name and mine. Ben squinted at it. Tracy leaned forward. Mallory was the first to speak. What is that? That, I said, is the deed to this house. My dad bought it 2 years ago, and I'm listed as co-owner. Silence. Heavy, awkward, delicious silence. Ben sat up straight. Wait, are you serious? Dead serious, Mallory scoffed. Then why didn't you say something? Because I didn't think I'd need to, I said. I figured I was among family. The word landed hard. Family. Tracy opened her mouth to speak but closed it again. You guys told me to sleep outside, I continued. You didn't offer a spot. You didn't offer food. You didn't check in. I was treated like an outsider in a house I partially own. More silence. No one looked me in the eye. So, from here on out, I said, I'll be setting a few rules, since apparently I need to be the one doing that. They didn't speak right away.
Ben just stared at the deed on my phone like it had personally betrayed him. Mallory crossed her arms and gave one of those tight, fake smiles that screamed, "This is ridiculous, but I'm too afraid to say it out loud." Tracy looked guilty. Caleb looked like he wished he'd stayed home. I stepped forward. "Rule 1, I said, voice firm but calm. No one sleeps outside, ever. If there aren't enough beds, we rotate. Everyone gets treated like a guest, including me." No one objected. Rule 2, if you cook, you clean. If you eat the last pancake, you ask who didn't get one. If you're here for a weekend, you act like a decent human being. No more of this figure it out yourself crap. Ben shifted uncomfortably. He knew I was talking to him. Rule 3, this is not a free-for-all party spot. My dad and I pay for the taxes, the maintenance, the insurance. You want to bring people here? You ask first. And that includes you, Mallory. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Oh," I added, "and the porch isn't a hammock zone anymore. It's not for setting a vibe. It's a sleeping space now. For actual humans." Mallory opened her mouth, then shut it again. Good choice. "And last," I said, "respect is no longer optional. If you can't treat people with basic kindness, this house isn't for you. Period. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about lording power over anyone. It was about restoring balance and making it crystal clear that being quiet didn't mean being weak. They'd mistaken my politeness for permission. Never again." Tracy finally muttered, "You're right. We were kind of jerks." "Kind of?" I said, raising an eyebrow. Ben actually looked ashamed for once. He nodded. "Yeah, we screwed up." I didn't let them off the hook with a hug or a laugh. I just said, "Glad we agree," and turned toward the kitchen to finally, make myself something to eat. And as I opened the fridge and saw that someone had finished literally everything, I smiled. Because starting tomorrow, the grocery bill would be split evenly. Funny how people treat you differently when they realize you have the upper hand. That evening, a complete 180th. Tracy suddenly became the nicest person alive. "Hey, I can cook dinner tonight. You like pasta, right?" Ben kept calling me bro every 5 minutes, like we were best friends from childhood. "Need anything from the store, man? I'll go right now, seriously. Say the word." Even Mallory toned it down. She actually offered me the bigger chair around the fire pit. Didn't speak much, just kept glancing at me with this tight-lipped expression, like she was still recalibrating how she was allowed to behave. I played it cool, said thanks, didn't gloat, didn't bring up the porch, didn't need to, because now they knew. They knew I wasn't the backup character. I wasn't the charity case cousin. I wasn't the guy you could ignore until you needed someone to grab firewood or refill the cooler. I was the co-owner, the one who could say no, the one with the quiet kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be felt. I watched them scramble to reframe everything, their tone, their body language, even the way they laughed. It was all a little too careful. They were trying to rewrite the narrative mid-script. We didn't mean to leave you out. It was just a misunderstanding. We were all tired. You know how it gets. Sure, tired people accidentally forget human decency. Happens all the time. But I let them talk. Let them twist their way into new justifications. Because I wasn't there to punish them. I was there to remember. To remember how quickly people show their true colors when they think you can't say no, and how just as quickly they paint over it when you finally do. That night, I slept in one of the guest rooms. Ben offered it without hesitation, said, "It's got the best mattress. You should take it." And as I closed the door behind me, I realized I didn't need their sudden kindness, because respect, once earned under false pretenses, isn't respect at all. It's survival, and from now on, I'd make sure they understood the difference. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. Sunlight poured through the window, soft and golden. I sat up in bed and just breathed. No sore back, no porch chill, no fake smiles or whispered jokes behind my back. Just silence and space that was finally mine. As I padded into the kitchen and started brewing a fresh pot of coffee, I couldn't help but think of Grandma. This had been her favorite place. Before she passed, she used to bring us up here every summer. Fishing, s'mores, card games that went way past bedtime. And one thing she always said stuck with me. You can tell who a person is by how they treat someone when they don't have to be nice. If only she could see this weekend, the way they acted when they thought I was no one, the way they flipped when they realized I was someone with a name on the deed. She would have sat them all down at that pinewood table and given them the look, the one where her glasses slipped a little down her nose and her voice dropped to a slow, disappointed whisper. Manners cost you nothing, but disrespect? That's expensive. She would have made Ben apologize for real. She would have cut through Mallory's passive-aggressive charm like a hot knife through butter. And she absolutely would have pulled me aside and said, "Why'd you let them treat you like that in the first place, sweetheart?" That part stung a little, because she'd be right. I had let them, out of habit, out of that old ache to be included, out of fear that standing up for myself would mean standing alone. But now I realized being alone on your own terms, way better than being surrounded by people who only love the version of you that's quiet and convenient. So I poured myself a mug, sat by the window, and whispered, "Thanks, Grandma," under my breath, because I knew what she would have said if she were still here. Next time someone tells you to sleep on the porch, remind them who built the house. Around mid-morning, I heard shuffling in the hallway. Ben appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair a mess, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He paused when he saw me, then smiled. Too wide. Too fast. "Hey, man, you sleep okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. Bed was great." He cleared his throat. "Cool, cool. I wanted to talk. If you've got a sec." I raised an eyebrow but didn't say no. He grabbed a seat across from me, picking at the edge of the table like he wanted to peel the awkwardness off with his fingernail. "Look," he started, "I know we didn't handle things right the first night. I didn't mean to make you feel, you know, like you didn't matter." I just sipped my coffee. It was chaotic. People were claiming spots, and I thought maybe you'd figure something out. "You always do." That line stuck with me. You always do. Like that was an excuse. Like being used to solving problems alone meant I should keep doing it. Endlessly. Thanklessly. I said, "You invited me, Ben." I didn't crash the weekend. I didn't sneak in through the woods. You asked me to come. He looked genuinely embarrassed. I know. I know. I guess I didn't think. And when I saw you out on the porch the next morning, I felt awful. But he didn't say anything then. Didn't do anything either. I didn't let him off the hook. It wasn't just the porch. It was the silence. From everyone. He nodded. "You're right. And I'm sorry. For real. I should have spoken up." I could tell he meant it, but I could also tell he thought this apology might fix everything. It didn't. "I appreciate the apology," I said. "But I'm not just here for an oops, my bad. I'm here to make sure it doesn't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone else you decide is less important that day." He was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, he said, "I get it now. I really do. And if you ever feel like I'm slipping into that again, call me out. Seriously. That surprised me, but it also made me wonder, would he have ever had this realization? If my name hadn't been on the deed? If Ben's apology was awkward but genuine, Mallory's apology, if you could call it that, was something else entirely. It started at lunch. She walked up to me while I was slicing tomatoes for sandwiches, all chipper and sweet, like we were besties in a coming-of-age summer movie. Hey, she sang, drawing out the word like it could erase everything. Need help with anything? I glanced at her. Her lip gloss was fresh. Her tone was sugar. Her eyes, calculating. I'm good, I said flatly. She lingered. So, I was thinking, we never really got to talk much this weekend. I feel like we didn't get off on the right foot. I bit back a laugh. The right foot? She literally told me to sleep outside like I was a wet dog, and then asked me to move my stuff so she could hang up a hammock. Now, she wanted to bond? Yeah, I said. First impressions weren't great. She blinked, surprised I didn't give her an easy out. Well, she tried again. Ben told me your dad owns the house. That's cool. You must feel so proud. There it was. The real reason for the sudden friendliness. Not remorse, not reflection, just damage control. I didn't smile. Actually, I said, it's not just my dad. I'm on the deed, too. She paused. Oh, wow. That's impressive. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to recalibrate how nice she needed to be, how careful her next sentence had to sound. Well, in that case, she said, voice softer now, I just wanted to say sorry if I came off. I don't know. Harsh? I shrugged. You came off exactly how you meant to. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she just said, I'll, let you get back to those tomatoes, and backed away like the air had suddenly gotten too hot around her, and maybe it had, because now she couldn't hide behind passive-aggressive charm. She couldn't weaponize her smile or wrap cruelty in politeness. I'd seen through it, and that terrified her more than anything. By Saturday night, things felt different. Not better, not healed, just different. Everyone was walking on eggshells, trying to be nice without looking like they were trying to be nice. The jokes felt forced. The laughter came too loud, too fast. Conversations stalled every time I walked into the room. It was like they were all waiting for me to explode, but I didn't. Because I didn't need to. They were uncomfortable in a house they used to rule. And for once, I wasn't. Tracy offered to make s'mores, a peace offering. Ben kept asking if I needed anything. Even Caleb, who barely knew me, thanked me 3 different times for letting him stay here. I didn't say much, just sat by the fire with my plate, quietly watching as everyone tried to reset the tone of the weekend without addressing what actually happened. That's the thing with people like this. They want reconciliation without accountability. They want everything to go back to normal, even if normal meant you were the one always giving up space. But I wasn't interested in normal anymore. So when Ben tried to start up a group card game like old times, and Mallory clapped and said, "Let's make new memories," I stood up. Actually, I said, I think I'll pass. All eyes turned to me. I'm gonna take a drive into town, maybe grab a coffee, need a little air. Ben looked confused. You sure? It's kinda late. Yeah, I said, grabbing my keys. But it's my house too, remember? I don't need permission. And I walked out the door, leaving behind the crackling fire and all their half-finished apologies. Because sometimes the best way to reclaim your space is to leave it for a while. Not in anger, not in drama, just to remind yourself that you're not stuck anymore. The drive into town was quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, just calm. I rolled the windows down. Let the cool air hit my face. Let the silence settle where their voices had been all weekend. I stopped at a little coffee shop I remembered from summers past, the kind with creaky floorboards and mismatched mugs, ordered a black coffee, no fancy syrups, no distractions, just something real. I sat outside under the string lights, sipping slowly, feeling more human with every minute away from that lake house. That's when I checked my phone. One new message. From Benjamin. I hesitated, then opened it. Hey man, I know this weekend started off rough. I was just trying to give people a fun time and didn't realize I was hurting someone in the process. I hate that you felt disrespected in a place that means something to both of us. If you ever want to reset, just as cousins, not as co-owners, I'd be open to that. No pressure. I stared at the screen. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't eloquent, but it felt sincere. I didn't reply right away, not because I was angry, but because I needed time to decide what I actually wanted. Did I want to go back to how things were? Did I want to forgive and forget? Or just forgive and remember? The truth was, I wasn't interested in revenge. I didn't want to kick anyone out or hold the house over their heads like a sword. I just wanted the same thing I'd always wanted, to be treated like I mattered. And now that I finally had that power, I wasn't sure how to use it, or if I even needed to anymore. Because the most surprising thing about getting what you deserve is realizing you don't have to prove yourself anymore once you do. When I got back to the lake house, the fire was still crackling, but the conversation had died. Tracy was scrolling on her phone. Caleb was half asleep. Mallory had disappeared, probably inside, licking her wounds in silence. Ben was sitting alone, staring into the flames. I didn't say anything, just walked past them and into the house. It was quiet inside, the kind of hush that only settles when people are too afraid to break it. I went to the far corner of the living room, to the place no one ever really paid attention to. A small wooden frame sat on a shelf, nearly covered by dust and old mail. Grandma's picture. She was smiling in it. Sun hat, gardening gloves, her hand resting on the porch railing she'd painted herself. I picked it up gently and blew the dust off the glass. And as I stared at her face, a thought came to me. She wouldn't have let this happen. Not to me. Not to anyone. She would have noticed I didn't have a plate. She would have opened a blanket for me herself. She would have told Mallory, with a sweet smile and a sharp tone, to sit her little hammock-loving self down and mind her manners. But she was gone now, and I was the grown-up in the room. That was the real shift. Not just the deed, not just the name on the paper. The realization that I didn't need anyone to stand up for me anymore. I could be that person. I could make this house her house, the kind of place she'd be proud of again. Even if that meant letting some people go, or letting them stay. But making sure they understood the rules now came with weight. I placed the photo in the center of the mantel, where everyone could see it. Then I grabbed a cloth and wiped the dust from the frame. Because some legacies aren't just inherited, they're chosen, carried, protected, and I was ready to carry hers. The next morning, I got up early again, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I wanted to be the first one awake. I made a pot of coffee, grabbed my mug, and stepped outside onto the porch. Same porch, same wooden planks, same morning chill, but everything felt different. Because this time I chose to be here. Not because there was no room. Not because I'd been pushed out. Because it was mine. I sat down on the old bench, tucked the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and watched the lake start to glow with sunlight. There was peace here now, not just in the view, but in me. That porch used to feel like a punishment. Now it felt like a throne, a place where I could breathe, think, reset. I heard someone stir inside. A door creaked. Then Ben stepped out, slowly. like he was waiting to see if I'd snap. He held his own coffee, awkward in his hands. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. He leaned against the post, looking out at the trees. "This place used to feel like magic," he said quietly. "I think we kind of ruined it." I shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe this was the reset it needed." He looked at me, guilt still written across his face. "You staying the rest of the weekend?" "Yeah," I said. "But I'll probably come back up on my own in a few weeks. Do some repairs, clean out the shed, get things how they should be." Ben nodded, then hesitated. "Want help with any of that?" It wasn't performative this time. It wasn't saving face. It was just a question. Simple, genuine. I took a sip of my coffee, then nodded once. "Yeah, that'd be good." And for the first time all weekend, there was no tension, no noise, just two cousins on a porch, quietly rebuilding something that had almost been lost. I stayed on the porch most of the morning, watching the water shift in the breeze, listening to birds I couldn't name, feeling the quiet settle into my bones. It felt earned. Inside the house, something strange started happening. People were cleaning, voluntarily. No one said a word. No one barked instructions. But one by one, they picked up brooms, wiped counters, folded blankets. Tracy started collecting the trash. Caleb rinsed out beer bottles and loaded the dishwasher. Even Mallory, was down on her knees, scrubbing the entryway tile with a rag and a frown. It wasn't performative this time. There were no exaggerated sighs, no comments about being such a good person, for helping. Just movement, effort, maybe even respect. Ben poked his head out onto the porch. "We're tidying up a bit," he said. "Didn't feel right leaving it all messy." I nodded. "Thanks." He paused. "You wanna join us?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're inviting me in?" He smiled, sheepish but real. "Yeah. This time we'll make space." I stood slowly, not rushed, not scrambling to be included. I stepped into the house at my own pace, and when I walked in, no one blinked. No one acted surprised. They just nodded, like I'd always been meant to be there, not as an afterthought, not as a backup plan, as someone who belonged. And it wasn't the cleaning itself that mattered. It was the shift. The energy in the house had changed. For the first time all weekend, it didn't feel like I was carrying a weight no one could see. It felt light, level, balanced. Like maybe, just maybe, we were finally learning what it meant to share a space with honor. That evening, I ended up back where it all started, the porch. But this time, I wasn't alone, and it didn't feel like exile. The sun was dipping below the tree line, turning the lake into liquid amber. The air was still, thick with pine, and something softer, a kind of peace that had been missing until now. Mallory sat in one of the chairs with a blanket wrapped around her. Tracy and Caleb were stretched out on the steps, quietly passing a bag of chips back and forth. Ben stood next to me, a beer in his hand, his voice low. "Didn't realize how important this place still was to you." "It wasn't," I said. Not until I remembered why it mattered. He gave a small nod. Didn't ask what I meant. Maybe he already knew. This porch had once felt like a boundary, a line they'd drawn between themselves and me. Now it felt like center stage. Not because I had made a scene, not because I'd yelled or demanded or thrown things, but because I'd stood my ground. Sometimes all it takes is one line in the sand to redraw the entire map. The breeze picked up and Mallory shivered. "Here," I said, tossing her the heavier blanket folded on the railing. She looked surprised, then grateful. "Thanks." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe it was a start. And as the last of the sunlight slipped behind the trees, I realized something. I didn't need everyone to like me. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't even need an apology that came with all the right words. What I needed, what I had now, was self-respect, and that had been missing long before this weekend ever began. The next morning, as I was packing up my things, my phone buzzed. Dad. His name lit up the screen, and for a second I just stared at it. We hadn't spoken much lately, mostly out of habit. He was always busy, always on the move, and I never wanted to bother him. But now I had something to say. I answered. Hey! Hey, kiddo, he said, voice warm but cautious. How's the lake house? I looked around. At the newly swept floors, the folded blankets, the coffee someone else had made this morning. It's good, I said. Better now. He paused. I got your message. About the deed. I didn't realize you'd be using that place much. Neither did I admitted. But I'm glad I came. He let out a slow breath. I'm sorry I wasn't clearer when I added your name. I just wanted you to have something solid. A place to go if everything else fell apart. That hit harder than I expected, because that's exactly what this weekend had felt like at first. Like everything was falling apart. But in the end, it turned into something I could actually stand on. Thanks for that, I said. I really needed it. More than I realized. There was a quiet moment between us. Not awkward, just full of unspoken understanding. Then I added, I think I'm going to come up here more often. Fix things up. Make it mine, you know. He chuckled. That place could use some love. So could the people in it, I said. He didn't ask questions, didn't press, just said, let me know what you need. It's your place as much as mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that he meant it, not just legally, emotionally. That house wasn't just a backup plan anymore. It wasn't a symbol of abandonment or a place of exile. It was mine. Because I claimed it. Because I stood on that porch and said, no more. Because I learned I don't have to be quiet to be included. And I don't have to be small to be loved. By Sunday afternoon, the car was packed, bags in the trunk, food containers sealed, the leftover snacks stuffed into grocery bags for the ride home. Everyone was moving slower, not from exhaustion, from awareness. Like they knew this wasn't just the end of a weekend, it was the end of an era. Ben gave me a nod as he loaded his backpack. Mallory offered a short, quiet, safe drive. Even Tracy gave me a hug, the kind that lingers just a second too long, like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. No one mentioned the porch. No one made a joke about next time. They understood. Things had shifted, and whether we saw each other again in that house would depend on what they chose to bring, not just in their bags, but in their behavior. I stayed behind for a while after everyone else pulled out of the driveway. Just me, the house, and the stillness that always followed a storm. I did one last walk-through, locked the windows, folded the towels, straightened the photo of Grandma on the mantel, and then I stood in the doorway. That old wooden frame had once felt like a gate I wasn't allowed to walk through. Now it felt like something I'd built myself, brick by brick, moment by moment. Leaving didn't feel like leaving. It felt like claiming space, even in absence. Because I knew I'd be back, not as someone begging to be seen, but as someone who had already seen himself. That house didn't just hold childhood memories anymore. It held a turning point, a shift, a quiet declaration that said, I belong, whether you like it or not. And when I finally turned the key in the lock and headed to my car, I didn't look back in fear. I looked back with clarity. A few weeks later, I drove back up to the lake house. But this time, I wasn't alone. In the passenger seat was someone who had never been part of the chaos, the porch drama, or the silent judgments. Jenna. We'd only been dating for a few months, but she was thoughtful, grounded. The kind of person who saw you before asking who you were related to. As the trees parted and the house came into view, she leaned forward in her seat. "This is it?" she asked. "It's beautiful." I smiled. "Yeah, it didn't always feel that way." We parked and stepped out into the still air. The lake shimmered. The porch creaked under our feet. Familiar now, but no longer haunted. Inside, everything was just how I'd left it. The photo of Grandma still centered, the blankets folded with care, the silence friendly. Jenna wandered through the house slowly, touching the wood frames, peeking through windows, pausing by the fireplace. "You can feel the history here," she said. "Some of it's heavy," I admitted. "But some of it," she said, turning to me, "feels like healing." We spent the weekend cooking, hiking, talking late into the night on that same porch where I'd once been told to sleep. But this time, it was our choice. And something about sharing the space with someone who had no preconceived version of me, someone who wasn't trying to rewrite their guilt or walk back their arrogance, felt like a kind of redemption I didn't know I needed. There was no need to explain the past, just the freedom to build something new on top of it. And as we watched the stars blink to life over the lake, Jenna rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "You're lucky to have this place." I nodded. I didn't always feel that way. But now? Yeah, I am. Because it wasn't just a house anymore. It was a boundary I had enforced, a memory I had rewritten, a part of myself I had finally reclaimed. The last morning of our weekend, I woke up early again, just like I had that first morning a weeks ago. But this time, the feeling in my chest wasn't confusion. It wasn't pain. It was peace. Jenna was still asleep, curled under a quilt in the room that used to feel like it didn't belong to me. Now it did. I stepped out onto the porch alone. The wood still creaked beneath me. The same breeze carried across the lake, but it wasn't cold anymore, not in the way it once was. I sat on the bench, sipped my coffee, and looked out at the water. That porch had been the symbol of everything I didn't have: belonging, respect, a place. But now, it was the symbol of everything I'd earned. Because the truth is, they didn't put me on that porch just to sleep. They put me there because they didn't think I'd say anything. They counted on me staying quiet, on me shrinking myself to fit into their idea of who I was. But I didn't. I spoke. I stood. I stayed. Not on the porch, in the truth of who I really am. And they saw it. Maybe not all of them learned. Maybe some never will. But that doesn't matter. Because the most powerful thing I took from that weekend wasn't a deed, or an apology, or even their respect. It was the knowledge that I will never again sit where I don't belong, not in someone's shadow, not outside someone's comfort, not on the metaphorical porch of anyone's life. The next time someone tries to push me aside, they'll find there's no room left for that, because I've already filled my space, completely, and it's mine now.